Hello and welcome everyone to another video blog for collegesportsmadness.com. My name is Zachary Bai. I'm the football and basketball broadcaster for the University of Albany, and as I sit here in Columbia, South Carolina on assignment for the UAlbany men's basketball team, I'm going to be talking about the football teams in the FCS, and Albany Great Danes 9-2 narrowly missed an at-large bid. But as I'm looking onto the field of the upcoming games in the first round of this FCS 20-team playoff bracket, there's one team, in my opinion, that really floats to the top in terms of teams that I really believe is going to go on to win the national championship. And my early favorite is North Dakota State. They are the #1 overall seed in the FCS playoff bracket, are the Bisons. And I know you'll say, hey, it's very fashionable to pick the #1 overall pick, but just so happens I'm a high fashion guy, and you'll see in the next couple minutes why I believe that the 10-1 Bison of North Dakota State are my favorites and should be everyone else's favorites to go on and win their second FCS national championship in as many years. So let's start with my first overall reason why I believe that the Bison are going to win the national title, and that's experience. This is a team that isn't as senior-laden as many other teams in the field, but they are as experienced as any other team in the country. And I don't know about you, I'd rather take a junior that has been on that bright stage of being in a national championship or in the playoff picture in the first place than a senior who's played 4 years and had never been there in the first place. So when you talk about experience and all three phases of the Bison's game, I don't see any weaknesses from where I'm standing. And at first, let's start with the offense. And you're going to talk about experience. You have to mention Brock Jensen, the quarterback and a junior, about 6'3", 225, taking snaps under center for the Bison. Last year as well, had a big national championship game, ran for a touchdown, threw for another. And although you look at Brock Jensen's stats and they don't pop right off the page, he doesn't throw for 250 yards a game. He throws for about $175 in the air, but he's relatively consistent and he manages the game. You're talking about a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and as a coach, I think you take that every time. And he's really the leader of that offense. And of course, things are a little bit easier for Brock Jensen and that North Dakota State offense when you have a two-headed monster in the backfield. I'm talking about Sam Ojiri and John Crockett. These are two running backs that have really popped off the page this year. Both of them would probably have more gaudy stats were it not for the other guy that they alternate carries with. But you're talking about two running backs that have both ran for over 700 yards this year. Each of them have hit pay dirt on the ground 8 different times each. They've gotten to the end zone. And when you get into playoff football, this time of year, as the weather gets colder, if you can establish the running game, you're going to be in good shape. And on top of that, you're not talking about just one back. Now you have two stables back there. They're going to wear down at an alternate basis, wear down those defensive lines and those cores of linebackers and really get into that secondary as they've done all season long, sort of like a lightning and thunder type of scenario with Jensen and Ojiri. And then you're talking about the wide receiver core that Brock Jensen throws to. Now, I'm not going to point out any one particular wide receiver because we're talking about 6 different players that line up at wideout that average more than 13 yards per game. Who do you pick? It's a pick your poison. You're not sure if Jensen's going to drop back and throw to one of those receivers. You're not sure if he's going to hand it off to Ojiri or Crockett. So it's really poses a problem for opposing defensive coordinators and will continue to pose a problem regardless of the opponent in these upcoming FCS playoffs. And this is an offense that averages 35 points per game this season consistently. Now, if you go look at their schedule, they scored the ball almost every single week. And when they didn't, that was against Indiana State, and they lost by 3 for their only loss of the season. That's an in-conference opponent in Indiana State, and a pretty good team at that. But you're talking about a team that averages that many points, and on the season, now get ready for this stat, they've outscored their opponents in wins this season by over 260 points. Just absolutely absurd offensive statistics. And you don't outscore teams the way that North Dakota State have without having a pretty good defense, and that's another reason why they're my favorite to win the national championship. You're talking about a defense that's held opponents, get ready for this again, to about 11 points per game. So look at that average score for North Dakota State, 35-11. That's about the average score this season in a pretty good MVC conference, one of the better conferences in the country, and they've stood stout in that conference week in and week out. And if you can be battle tested in a tough conference, then you're not going to be surprised by anything when you get into this FCS playoff format, win or go home. They're used to that sort of environment, trying to survive in the MVC, and they not only survive, but they've thrived. So that's why moving forward, that defense is going to be a point of emphasis. They give up less than 200 yards per game. So you juxtaposition that with the offensive stats, and you're looking at a lot of blowouts this year. They've absolutely shut down the run game. They give up 2.4 yards per carry. That equals a lot of 3-and-outs, folks. And then you're talking about they've given up only 3 rushing touchdowns in the entire 2012 season. I mean, just absurd statistics. And then you go to the passing game. You're talking about a defense that consistently turns the ball over. They've totaled 27 sacks this season. They've forced 14 fumbles. And then you tack on the 8 interceptions in their secondary that they've totaled. Just absurd statistics. And that secondary led by quarterback Marcus Williams, who has 4 interceptions of his own this year. He had 7 interceptions last year, very instrumental in their national championship run. So look for that secondary to step up in these playoffs as they have all year long. And I'm not saying that North Dakota State is just going to roll through, okay? Because anytime you're in a playoff format against the best teams in the country, there's no such thing as a easy walk to the national championship. It's going to be tough. You're going to have to show up and play every game against teams like Old Dominion and Montana State, Eastern Washington, Sam Houston State, Appalachian State, and don't sleep on a team like a Stony Brook or maybe even a Colgate. You're never sure in this type of format. A team gets hot. But for my pick, I'm going with North Dakota State Bisons to repeat as national champions. On December 1st, they're going to play the winner of Eastern Illinois and South Dakota State. South Dakota State is an in-conference rival. If they were to get upset in this 20-team bracket, I believe it would be against South Dakota State. But if you're mixing all those teams that I mentioned before, and you're stirring them in a pot, and you're going to nail me down and say, hey, pick one, I'm going to pick the favorite, and they're tried and true, return a whole bunch of those players that contributed that national title last season, and they're back and ready to contribute in that same type of way to hang their second FCS National Championship banner. I appreciate you taking the time out and watching this video. I'm Zach Bai for CollegeSportsMadness.com. I hope to see you next time.